I'm your host, Thibaut, and today I'm thrilled to introduce a guest who truly embodies the intersection of technology, science, and marketing, Mitja-Alexander Linss. Mitja is a senior leader at Karger Publishers, a 130 years old Swiss medical publisher specializing in scientific research and healthcare communication. With a 20-year career distinguished by strategic growth and initiative marketing in tech-driven companies, Mitja currently serves as head of marketing at Karger. He's at the helm of a global marketing initiatives that drives growth, not only in Karger core medical publishing business, but also in its emerging healthcare consulting and engagement practice. Before joining Karger, Mitja led key initiatives at ProNavigator, an AI-driven knowledge management startup, and previously built a powerhouse marketing team for Research Solutions, a top SaaS platform providing pharmaceutical companies with critical access to peer-reviewed scientific literature. Mitja graduated summa cum laude from Johannes Gutenberg University in Mainz, Germany, and has consistently demonstrated how to leverage technology to accelerate scientific and business impact. I am passionate about scientific communication, so this episode holds a special place for me. So buckle up for a deep dive into the fascinating world of medical publishing, AI, and growth marketing with Mitja-Alexander Linss. Mitja, welcome to the show.
Great to be here.
So before we deep dive into all the fascinating topics that we discussed to prep this episode, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, how you came to what you're doing now?
Yeah, I'm a technology marketer now for over 20 years. I've always been passionate about both the art and the science of marketing in different industries, manufacturing, software, and lately publishing. In the last 10 years, I spent in what is called information services and very intimately familiar with scientists, researchers, and the world of science, but also technology.
Good. So let's talk about the evolution of scientific communication and how scientific consume content. And obviously things are changing, and we'll really go into how things are changing now. But can you tell us how scientists and researchers engage with publication, especially now in the digital era?
Yeah, certainly. Just maybe a few numbers to open this conversation. There are about 70 million articles out there since 1996, about 46,000 journals. You have to cut through the noise, and there's a lot of information out there. HCPs in recent surveys prefer 90% of HCPs and researchers prefer long form content and short form content and videos in under 5 minutes. That gives you an impression of what they really prefer, and 41% of them really are actively on social media. So the so-called publication extenders, so other types of communication other than long form text, are really increasingly gaining popularity. And that's videos, that's animations, that's podcasts, and a lot of researchers and scientists today like to engage with short form and video content, and not with long form journal text. And that's the reality of how clinical research and healthcare information is consumed in these days.
It's interesting because when you think, so the publishing industry exists for many years. I mean, I myself, I worked for Elsevier, which claim to fame is publishing Galileo, so it dates back even before your own company started.
Right.
Like for hundreds of years, like there was long form content, books, publication, and even today the thing is scientists are evaluated, like their careers progressing based on this long form content that we are publishing. Yet I agree with you, I'm a scientist as well, And I love all the new form of communication because, as you said, you have so much. I remember during COVID, I think in 1 year there was 40,000 articles just on COVID. So you can't keep up with everything, and you want things that are easier to consume. So and we'll talk again about AI later on, but just with tools like ChatGPT and plain language summaries, visual abstract. So all this is definitely simplifying scientific communication. Do you have a view on that?
In a lot of ways, we embrace this trend at Karger Publishers, and we actually produce a lot of that short form content and videos and podcasts to really bring our research beyond the publishing and the scientific community. The problem is that a lot of that for now across the industry is not part of the peer review process.
Yeah.
So and of course, for something to be the version of the record for a certain piece of scientific work, it has to go through the peer review process, and a lot of these new formats aren't yet. And the interesting question is, what is going to be the version of record going forward that scientists refer to? Currently, it's a long form journal content or articles, but that might change as soon as more of these formats are actually part of the peer review process, because maybe then scientists are not really focusing on the version of record in the format of journals anymore. But we're not there yet, even though a lot of formats, other shorter formats, gain popularity among researchers and HCPs who are far too busy to engage with long form content regularly on a regular basis.
Yeah, I think there is, on one hand, so there are you touch on several things that are really interesting, because there is the version that will be there for the record that is kind of the gold standard today, because it went through the peer-reviewed process, which is still, as I said, the gold standard, which is accepted. But interestingly, now online, on various platforms, whether you're talking about specialized forums or LinkedIn, which is a bit more generalist, a lot of discussion is happening. A lot of constructive criticism is happening. A lot of live review almost is happening. Yet right. It's not yet the accepted way of doing constructive criticism of science, and definitely not something which is there for the record.
Right.
Do you think that this can ever change? Because as I said before, this process is so an integral part of the scientific life. I mean, it's linked to how scientists develop their career, how do they get hired, they get a tenure track, they get promoted, et cetera, et cetera. So even though we see a lot of change with regards to engagement with content, constructive criticism of content, live debate, the way, the gold standard, I don't see it being challenged.
No, it's not. And maybe that's also a good way, because I think we need the peer review process to work, and we need to have trust. We need to have trust as a scientific community in the peer review process. But I am optimistic that formats accepted in the peer review process are going through an evolution. And plain language summaries are something that is more and more accepted. There are certain formats for plain language summaries. They have to be between 250 and 800 words, and between 2 and 6 pages long. I think we are on a pathway where supplemental data, for instance, can be visualized in 3D, and where other formats are entering the peer review process. And as that happens, I think that is slowly going to evolve.
It's interesting, because talking about peer review, I think it was this week that I've seen a publisher experimenting with AI so it's not AI peer review because it's not really peer anymore, but
Yeah.
AI review. Have you heard about that already?
Yes, of course. We it's an ongoing discussion, and there are lots of use cases in peer review, especially in peer review for AI.
Yeah, I'd love to hear of your view on all the different use cases of AI in publishing, because it can be seen from so many different angles, from the publishing process, from the authoring process. And I know ever since ChatGPT was launched, there was so much debate on should author use AI to help them write something. I have very strong perspective on that. But I'd love to first hear your view on that, and let's see, if we disagree.
Well, there are obviously a lot of problems with that, because the peer review itself is confidential. It's also meant to be conducted by humans. So of course there are the debates, and there are technologies out there to actually is AI to become a peer reviewer? Is AI going to be able to write a paper and be an author of a paper, for instance? And these are all very, very real technological possibilities at the moment, but they're ethically questionable. And with good reason, Karger Publishers has a policy where authors have to disclose the use of AI in their manuscripts, as part of the submission, and Karger is also not authorizing or allowing or employing in any way pure AI resources as in the review process. Certainly, there are lots of conversations around how to streamline the review process with AI, and these are legitimate cases. There are of course applications from a research in integrity perspective to use AI. There is paper mill and scientific fraud detection, as well as the effort to minimize retractions. Manuscript screenings and AI peer review assistance is something that's gaining popularity. And of course, citation and research validation, plus the assessment of research novelty, and even the recruitment of qualified reviewers. These are all cases where AI is being employed right now in the peer review process. And but I think there's currently an ethically questionable use cases are definitely the AI itself to become a reviewer, and that's for the time being discouraged in the publishing community with good reason.
So talking about some of the AI tools that you're employing as part of the reviewing and publishing process. So you mentioned things around fraud detection, and so we heard in the past that papers were retracted, for instance, because some images were just fabricated. So 2 questions. So are you using this kind of tools, to identify if research data submitted are real data or fabricated data? That's the first question. And then the second question is, if you do that, do you see more problems now than before, or do you find more problem now than before?
Perhaps I want to take this question just to give an overview of what we're doing at Karger Publishers. I think we've recently launched an AI partnership program, and so we're actively looking for innovators and developers for AI solutions in certain areas. And so we are doing this because we really want to engage with the entrepreneurial and scientific community to work on solutions, AI solutions, very, very focused AI solutions. For instance, in the areas of impact and reach, where amplifying influence and reach with AI tools is something that we are exploring, or scientific communications. So simplifying complex clinical research data with AI. Training models is another area that we're looking at. So to train, to partner with LLMs to train Karger peer-reviewed data, and licensing, of course, integrating peer-reviewed health data into AI solutions. The last two areas are content creation, so automating the creation of high quality scientific content, and medical decision making, so providing clinicians with evidence-based insights. So these are all areas that we're looking at to work with, with outside companies, LLMs, or developers. In terms of what you have asked, yes, we are employing a number of, or looking into developing our own AI tools, mainly around chatbots. That's an area we're looking at right now, and AI assistance, specifically, when it comes to being a resource for authors, finding journals and navigating the publishing process, because we hear from our authors that that's an area where that really would be valuable. And we are, of course, looking at fraud detection, and how we can avoid retractions and fraud in research. We have a research integrity unit who actually looks at research integrity, but they're just at the beginning stages. I think we're certainly looking into that, but I think the focus right now is more on production. So optimizing our production and peer review processes, and decreasing the time it takes to go to acceptance and publications with our papers. And chatbots, as I said, is an area we're looking at. While we're very, very, very aware of the research integrity, and we're very, very vigilant about that, it's not an area where we ourselves use AI that we have developed.
So you mentioned something interesting. I'd like to go back. You talked about AI and licensing, because obviously a lot of AI is nothing without data, and publishers are definitely one of the provider of high quality data. So I'll tell you a personal story. So I had a project years ago when the whole LLM thing started. Shortly after ChatGPT, we tried to develop an LLM from scratch using data sourced in a legal and ethical way. And at that time, it didn't work. So we couldn't get enough data. And and the interesting thing is that when you looked at some of the LLMs that were already on the market, obviously they had taken data without asking. It was not legal. And if you see, it was difficult, I think, to not see that on LinkedIn in the past few weeks when OpenAI launched its new image generator, and then you started to see all those things that looked like the Ghibli of Simpsons, which obviously didn't allow that to happen, but still all those tools were trained on data that they acquired without asking and without entering into a business negotiation. But obviously, tech companies are pushing for the law being a little bit more relaxed on what you can do with data without having to license the data.
Yeah.
How do you think about, how do you see that as a publisher, as someone whose business is actually to make sure that you work hard to have high quality data available?
Yeah, so I think it's important to remember that we're talking about very specific data here. We're talking about structured and peer-reviewed clinical research data. And that's a difference to just general data that might also be publicly available. It's different. Why? Because it's obviously legally protected by authors and publishers' copyrights, right? So this is work that has been done, or that has been research that has been documented and achieved under and there are copyright laws applying here. The second part is that it's been developed in a peer review process that is confidential by definition, right? So that is another that is another thing that needs to be taken into account. And even if some of the findings are published open access, it still doesn't change the fact that the underlying data is copyright protected and the peer review is confidential. And the other thing is even if you are running larger LLMs on peer-reviewed clinical research data, it wouldn't actually sort of generate the results everybody is looking for, because the bigger LLMs are far too big and general to really learn from the models from the very niche research data that is available. So it needs specific LLMs, specifically developed learning language models for this, which is the reason why the proper way to do that is to license and to work with the pharma companies who are actually developing some of these language models or using technology to do that, and who are working with us to license the clinical research data. And I think the answer is, I guess, from a publisher's perspective, in the case of clinical research data, in our view, from the view of Karger Publishers, there's no way around proper licensing, and that's the proper way to do it. And we have some use cases with pharmaceutical companies that are actually doing exactly this, developing the technology and developing the specific large language models or LLMs that are helping them to do this. And we're specifically talking to them about very specific licensing terms. And I think this is really the proper way to do it, because, as I said, copyright compliance and copyright permissions are involved. Confidentiality in the peer review process is involved. And by the way, in some general fashion, the consent of authors is, if not required, then at least ethically to be recommended. So that's I think my viewpoint on that.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think what I remember now the expression that I was looking for. It's the concept of fair use.
Yes.
Fair use of content, and I think this is where a lot of the large tech companies are pushing to redefine the definition of what fair use is. And I mean, I tend to agree with you. Like at the moment, there is a clear definition of copyright, and if you want to use the data, you need to obtain the copyright. But we've seen that. I mean, we've seen, at least I've seen with some content that we had that was definitely protected by copyright, that still ended up in some of those large LLMs, because when you were asking certain questions, you will find really, really specific part of our content. And obviously, I mean, this is something which is changing at the time as we speak. I mean, it's I think a lot of legal debate around that is still happening, and obviously it's still not finalized. So we'll see, I think, during the next few months and years how this evolves and how the content, the high quality content which is being developed by a number of people is protected and then can be licensed. Otherwise, if it's not licensed, then it gets very difficult to have the resources to produce this content. So it's kind of a vicious circle if you can't do that. But yeah. Let's move on to something maybe a little bit more positive. Like the innovation in publishing and actually the use of technology in publishing to actually consume content in different ways. So a few months ago, I got myself virtual reality goggles from Meta, and of course they are great for gaming. But the interesting thing is that they have a whole ecosystem of application, and some of those applications are actually professional application. And one of those was an application to visualize molecules, proteins in 3 dimensions. I'm a structural biologist, so I spent many hours during my PhD looking. That was many years ago, but looking at a screen with very poor three-dimensional goggles. And now, obviously, 20 years later, the technology has dramatically evolved. But for me, it was really mind-blowing how much better it is to understand science when you have this kind of tool. I mean, it's not a gimmick, and it's very difficult actually to explain how good it is unless you experience it. So can you tell us a bit more about, like some of those innovation in publishing that your company are working on?
Yes, absolutely. So we have a pilot program with a partner of ours called Ludenso. Ludenso is a specialist in visualizing textbooks. And we're actually the first ones in the industry across in the publishing industry that have rolled out a program like this for journals. It exists a lot around books, scientific books, but not in journals. And so what we did with Ludenso is we offer to Karger authors who are submitting papers to us the possibility to visualize supplemental data they submit as part of the journal article in 3D. And the way to do that is it works through a CR code, and they can actually activate their phone, their mobile phone, and view the data in 3D through a viewer on their mobile phone. It works pretty seamlessly. I've tried it myself. It's not, a breathtaking application of virtual reality where you wear goggles like this, where you sort of immerse yourself totally in that background. But it is quite interesting and cool to see how you can actually, it works even with a print paper and that you're looking at, or you're looking at the paper and the paper on the screen, and you use your phone, and you can visualize let's say molecule structures on your phone right there based on essentially the paper's data. And that's a quite cool usage. I like to talk about it because not a lot of people know about it yet, and we need to get the word out that we actually offer this. And it's still a pilot program, but we hope that more and more visual data that we or authors are publishing in journal articles are going to be visualized like that.
So you mentioned molecules, so that's for me, yes, of course, that's the first thing that comes to mind, because these are three-dimensional objects. Are there other types of data that this technology can visualize?
So there are certain limits in terms of what what can be visualized and what not. But there's specific terms and sets, and those limits and specs are communicated to the authors throughout the process. But really, it's any data that can be visualized. So it's not just molecule structures. So it's really a large application of supplemental data that can be visualized with it.
Okay, no, sounds really interesting. So. Yeah. And you mentioned when we talked the first time that your company is also supporting innovation, and you were talking about a specific innovation award that your company is involved in. Can you tell us a bit what it is and what kind of innovation you're supporting?
Yes, absolutely. It's called the Vesalius Innovation Award, named after Andreas Vesalius, the medieval pioneer in anatomy. So we are connected in multiple ways to Andreas Vesalius, and that's why we named the award like that. For 5 years we have done this award. The award ceremony happens in December at the SDM week in London. It's part of that, and we award entrepreneurs and startups in publishing, science communication, and AI. There are 3 prizes. One main prize valued at 15,000 Swiss francs, I believe it is, or dollars, I don't know. And the finalists, there are 2 finalists valued at 5,000. So it really gives entrepreneurs and scientists a stage, where they could present their findings. It's a really, and we're invested in it because we see it as a good way to support the scientific community and scientific innovation. And obviously, sometimes we work together with some of the finalists and the winners. Ludenso, the company that I mentioned, actually was a finalist, and I think last year, Clear Skies, a very well-known startup in research fraud detection and research integrity, was also a finalist, along with Signals, another one. So it's really a really good platform for for entrepreneurs and scientists and scientific startups in the publishing and scientific arena to be noticed.
So we are coming toward the end of a discussion, and I think the thing that I find fascinating about publishing is that, the way we started the conversation is that we talked about the history of publishing. So it dates back centuries, literally.
Yeah.
It went back through a number of transformations. There were journal articles written when there was the transition from print to digital, saying that it will kill the publishing industry. And I think quite the opposite. I think it really helped with the dissemination of scientific content. I think now it's impossible to imagine, just having access to print, and that I think, over 95-99% of the content that we consume is digital.
Right.
Now we are going through another transformation, and you talked about it. AI is everywhere, but also different ways of consuming content, a more original way of visualizing complex content, of consuming content, also short form, recorded, what we are doing actually, like podcast and other form. So it's an whole industry which went through many transformations and which is more dynamic than ever. So I think it's good in a time when disseminating scientific facts is more important than ever. So yeah, I think this is important to insist on that. So looking into the future, so I think fortunately we talked about a lot of positive things happening.
Yeah.
But so what's your view for the things to happen? I know it's difficult to predict what will happen next week, given how fast things are changing now. But if I ask you to talk about the next couple of years, what do you think will happen?
Well, let's continue the positive view on this. And I think when we look at technology and how technology evolves over the next decade, then I think we're getting closer to a vision that I had when I started to work in science and in research 10 years ago. And that is, rather than searching publications, on Google or on PubMed and working through all the content. And it would be really, really cool to just ask a question and get an answer, right? To get an answer on not just publications, but an answer to your question about the research you have. And I think that's a vision that I have, that I think we're going to get a lot closer to in the next decade, really, because we're seeing that search and discovery environments are merging and overlapping with AI chatbots and AI assistants. So really, we're getting closer to that vision. I think there's no doubt that technology, when we look at technology in the next decade, AI-driven personalization and generative AI will play a big role, right? There is, personalization and personalized content that can be sort of put together for authors based on personalization and based on behavioral targeting. I can give you an example. We're using a platform called Hum that uses AI-based behavioral targeting of 15 million user profiles we have on Karger.com to segment them and enable us to communicate, with authors on what they want, on the content they really want, and they are seeking on the platform. Other big areas, of course, are generative AI. So the tools for authors to write and papers and manuscripts. We have already talked about the AI peer review, right? So that's, of course, a big area of I think also positive developments going forward. Research integrity they're definitely, that's an area where we have a lot of evolution and a lot of development. AI is really, it's kind of funny, it's ironic to some degrees. AI is being used to detect AI that is being used in turn for fraud, right? So that's a big area, that we need to, where we will see some evolution. We've talked about interactive and immersive reading experience. So I think for now it's augmented reality, where we augment data, that we supplemental data, for instance, but virtual reality is the next playing field. And it's going to be interesting to see where that leads for science. I've talked about the version of record, at the beginning of the conversation. How will the version of record really evolve? And a few things that we haven't really mentioned is accessibility and inclusion. So I think in terms of both translations and accessible formats, there will be groundbreaking developments. There already are, right? An area that's also something to look out for is blockchain and rights management. So how can we actually, going back to the discussions about licensing, how can we actually make sure that with technology, with blockchain technology, that fair compensation is being awarded to the rights owners and to authors. But overall, this brings me back to where I started. It all is connected to a simple way, just to ask a question and get the right answers. Not just publications, not just parts of the puzzle, but really, answering a question that you ask fundamentally with the right information extracted from many places. So I think that's my vision for the next decade, and I think we're getting awfully close.
Well, thanks, Mitja. I think it's a great way to finish this discussion on a very positive note, and thinking that we are making high quality scientific content consumption easier for scientists, but not only for scientists. As you said, you can ask a question, find the right answer. So if we can make it easy for scientists, we can make it easy for everyone. And I think that's something that we definitely need more out there. So thank you very much. And I really enjoyed the conversation. I hope listener will enjoy too.
Thank you.